Do you ever feel like your therapist could drill into a single sentence that you've said for maybe the whole hour or the whole day? Like they could just sit there and pick apart a single feeling that you've had or an incident that you went through, and they could talk about it for hours and hours and hours. Does that drive you a little bit up the wall? Because I can understand that. But let me explain why that is. What we now call counseling or psychotherapy spun out of a much earlier tradition, which they would just call philosophy of the mind. And philosophy, as we all know, is filled with asking a bunch of questions. Sometimes questions that feel annoying or tedious, sometimes questions that feel too big to even possibly answer, but it's important we ask the questions anyway. And philosophy eventually spun out into more specific realms and became sort of operationalized through the concept of psychiatry in the 1900s. It's now turned into psychology as its separate field, and then counseling has sort of spun off this concept of psychology. But philosophy is the foundation, and everyone knows philosophers ask a lot of questions, and psychology, counseling, it's no different. Psychotherapy is largely about the why. Why are you doing that? Why is that happening? Why did you have that thought? Why did that person act that way? It's all about why. As I always say, awareness is the first step, and awareness is really the biggest step. And awareness comes with asking questions. It comes from understanding. So your therapist is going to ask a lot of questions. Some of them might be annoying or make you feel like you're being interrogated, but those questions are important. And a lot of times it's to bring you to the deeper truth. Let's go through an example, and maybe I can make it a little bit clearer on why therapists do this. Take this for example. You hold the door open for someone walking into the store behind you. Why'd you do that? The reason that you held the door open might seem simple or one-directional to you. Chances are there's a lot more happening underneath the surface, so let's talk about it. So let's go through some common reasons that people would say that they held the door open for someone and see what we notice. The first might be, well, they were right there. This would be a physical instinct. You didn't even really think about it that much. Someone was right behind you. It's just really built into your muscle memory to hold the door open for someone when they're nearby. Another person might say, well, it was the kind thing to do. Okay, so that would be a value-based behavior. So that would be based on a value that you hold. You value kindness. You want to live out your kindness. You held the door open because that was the kind thing to do. What if someone says, I held it open because I hoped that they would do the same for me? If I were the one walking behind, I would hope that they would hold it open for me. This is pro-social reciprocity. What if someone says, well, because being nice makes me feel good? That would be emotion driven. They know that if they act a certain way, they experience good emotions, they feel good, and so they act that way so they feel more good in the future. What about someone saying, I held the door open because they might have yelled at me if I didn't? Well, then that would be a sort of fear-based protective action. You held the door open because you were worried about some sort of negative consequence. What about someone saying, I held the door open for them because they were good looking? That would be a bit of a libidinal or hormonal urge driven by some sort of sexual desire or social desire to gain favor with that person. Someone else might say, well, I held the door open because I'm the type of person that does something like that. And this one is fun because it's an identity-based behavior. So they view themselves as the type of person that holds the door open. And so when the opportunity comes to hold the door open, they're the person that would do that. They do that. So it's based on their identity, their self-view. What if they said it would be sinful not to? Then that would be a faith-based decision, one made to appease the value system or the deity that they pray to. So there can be so many reasons, so many individual reasons that someone might do a single act. And from the outside, we may assume that it's one reason and it could be a different one. And the fun thing about this is that chances are it was more than one. It could be all of these at once. They could all be playing a part underneath the surface, guiding you into this behavior that feels to you just like an impulse or an instinct, but is actually being guided by these layers of the social reciprocity, the value system that you have, this sort of guilt feeling that you might have religiously if you didn't hold the door open, or morally if you didn't hold the door open. Maybe it really was to gain favor because they were cute and you wanted to hit on them. There can be so many different reasons why you might hold the door open, and maybe all of them are true. A lot of times that's what we have to accept in psychotherapy too, is that Yes and is typically going to be the case, not either or but rather. A lot of times it's going to be all of them in varying degrees, and it's important for us to understand which of those are really pulling at us and which of those are guiding us the most, and in different moments, what are rising to the surface, what are most powerful over us, what are most impactful, and in which situations do these things arise or become more powerful over us. Basically, just self introspection, understanding why we think and act the way that we do. So that's kind of the reason that therapists can be so annoying. I know I'm one myself. We can be obnoxious. We can drill into one thing over and over and over. But it's because if you are only really seeing that surface level, if you're only seeing it as an instinct, you just might be missing a lot underneath the surface if you're just reducing your actions to only one reason or narrowing your scope of view for why you behave the way you do or think the way you do to these singular reasons. It's important to widen the scope to understand all of the things that are impacting our actions and our moods and our behaviors. So if your therapist is really digging into something, it's probably important. I would imagine that they're not just doing that to be obnoxious or to interrogate you. If we wanted to be detectives, I suppose we probably could. But we chose this field because we want to help. And we understand that sometimes helping means really holding up the mirror or really encouraging the person to look a lot closer to understand better so they can navigate that with the knowledge and the information that they need to make changes or reframe what they've been through or really just know themselves better. There is a lot of peace that comes with self-knowledge and self-awareness. I hope this kind of explained why you may sometimes get a little bit annoyed by your therapist, but trust me, it's all part of the process, so don't hold it against us. But if you're having a problem, just tell them. We want to be communicated to. We want to understand our impact. We need to know if the approach that we're taking is or isn't working. So bring it up. If you're like, hey, I noticed that you're asking a lot of questions about this. Why are we digging into this so much? Then they may have an angle that they were taking and they can tell you about it and you guys can explore that together. So communication is everything. But I just wanted to make this video to give a little bit of an explanatory reason for why we as psychotherapists kind of have to be a bit relentless. Thanks for watching.